Hello, and welcome to another episode of the M42 Adventures Podcast. I am your host, Rick Trimmer, and today we have on a gentleman that Chase again tracked down. Chase, if you guys don't know, is my CEO here at M42 Adventures. He kind of holds the fort down while I'm off trying to travel and do some fun stuff with M42 Adventures and my family. And so he's been trying to find guests and people that are, just doing cool things in the outdoor field and in life. And so he actually reached out to this gentleman who apparently, once they started talking, he knows Seth Studley, which a lot of you guys know. Seth's been on the podcast one or two times and is very involved here at M42 Adventures. And they are friends. They had actually just gone to lunch, and so we had not known that connection. But this gentleman is a Christian first and foremost. It's on his Instagram profile, and then he's a coach, an author. He's on the FCA board and a podcaster. So I'm excited for this conversation and see where it leads. Let's check it out. I felt slower. So yeah, man, how's it going? How you doing?
I'm doing well. It's officially the last day of school here in Florida. I'm in Orlando, so the kids are done.
Yeah,
which is
ready
good.
to be out.
It ramps back up, and it's going to be a crazy summer.
For sure. I actually, I was just in Florida, so we did a 3-month road trip of the U.S., and we had done it, I think like 3 years ago, we'd done another like 4 months, and we came down to Florida. I had never been there and loved it. I mean, if there's a place that I could move after we went to all 50 states, and if there's a place I could move, it would be Florida, and my kids would loved Florida.
Unfortunately, I don't disagree with you with that statement, but I don't want you to move here.
Oh, 100%. 100%. No, that's us in Utah as well.
We are so sick of everybody coming down here.
Yeah.
I mean, it's always been a popular state. I'm a 5th generation Floridian, so we've been here forever. And growth is always good, I guess, but in the long run, you get to the point where there's not much of Florida left. And
100%.
if you get a chance to come back, I don't know what areas that you went to, go to the middle of the state.
Okay.
That's like real Florida. So we break Florida down in different parts. So North Florida, and that's kind of north central Florida. So Tallahassee east, and then down to around Ocala. That's what we consider north central Florida. That's kind of like South Georgia, where you have a little bit of rolling hills, lots of pine trees, terrible humidity. It's awful. But it's also, it gives you a sense of kind of that Georgia type landscape. And then the panhandle is just flat, but it's called Lower Alabama. So it kind of bleeds back and forth. And then you have Orlando, where I'm at. Central Florida is kind of a hybrid mix, and then South Florida. But then the center of the state, and I don't know, I haven't looked at the statistics lately. The center of the state used to, per capita, and which created it for Florida, have the most cattle, more than any other state in the union, so to speak. And it's amazing because it's just perfect grazing land for cattle, because it's just flat and palmetto trees and palmetto bushes. And so it's really cool and beautiful. And if you get a chance, then you can go down there and do a airboat ride, and it's fun.
Yeah, we did like 3 weeks the first trip. And then we just did 2 weeks this last trip, and we went everywhere. We started over in like Destin, and my wife loves Rosemary Beach. And then we came through and we went to Crystal Hot Springs and swam with the manatees. And I always get the name wrong, like Wiki Wachi or Waki Wichi or something.
That's right. You did really well. Most
did
people butcher that thing.
Yeah, we stayed there for a few nights and played in the canals. And then we come down, we spent, I love the Everglades. We actually went out and was trying to catch pythons, and I love animals. My kids love animals. And so we went out every night with spotlights and trying to catch critters and turtles. And we caught a bunch of different.
There's plenty down there.
Dude, it's wild, man. Yeah, we saw water moccasins. We saw like, I can't remember, 17 or something one night.
Wow.
Just lots of snakes and things. But yeah, man, we love it. We went all the way down to Key West. It's all, like you said, it's so different because some places are remote and just good old country boys, which I love being from Utah. And then you can get into the city and find a nice meal, or we went up to Universal. My kids love that. In
Where
Orlando.
did you play with gators?
Gators were in the Everglades.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep. we did the airboat tours and stuff like that. But yeah, man, just a good state. It's got a lot of my values, which is, I loved all the people I see eye to eye with most of them. And so, yeah, it was fun, man. It's a good state. So, yeah,
I'm a big fan.
Yeah, I bet. So, all right. So Jeff Forrester, right? That's who I got on here today. And I just found out, yesterday that I was interviewing you, which is pretty standard with the way
it's
I
better.
operate.
It makes for a better conversation. I don't tell him anyways. Like he might know a couple weeks ahead of time, but I don't tell him any information because then he jumps in. It's exciting for him. It's good.
Yeah. Well, and it's, do you know anything about me at all, Jeff, at all?
Very, very little.
Seth, right?
Yes.
That's wild.
So what's
Chase
funny
didn't even know you knew Seth.
Yeah, and that the day he reached out, I had breakfast with Seth.
That's what he said. Yeah,
so
that is insane.
And then a friend of mine who has another podcast, Last in Line Leadership, had interviewed Seth, I think once or twice for his podcast. And so I had seen some of his stuff when my friend posted it. Then I was at a Dad's Edge event here in Orlando. I don't know if you know Larry Hagner and the Dad's Edge.
Yeah.
Seth was one of the speakers.
Yeah.
And so he had started talking. He mentioned M42, and I had heard about M42 because I also follow Ryan Mickler. And then I'm in the hunting industry, just got into it. So just all of that was just interesting. And then all of a sudden he reached out and was like, do you want to be a guest? I was like, sure. This is it's bound to happen at some point.
That's right. Yeah. I love it. And so, so he had told me yesterday. And so I just kind of started digging into you and seeing, Facebook stalking you, right, and things like that. And you got quite the resume here, man. So I need to jump into this. You're first of all, I like you. You put Christian first, right? So your faith is obviously important to you. And then coach, author, FCA, I don't know what that is, and a podcaster. You do it all. So tell me a little bit about yourself.
Okay.
Who is Jeff Forrester?
FCA is the Fellowship of Christian Athletes.
Okay. So and I saw on your page, it seems like you mentor and coach a lot of student athletes, right?
Yes.
That's your main thing.
I love it. I absolutely love it.
Which is so needed, right? You hear all the issues that these young kids face. And
it's interesting.
It is so needed.
It's needed, but what's the best way to phrase it? Underutilized and tapped into. Because there's a lot of people similar to me, but so few parents choose to invest in their young person, which I understand as a parent that there's a level of ego that comes with that of, okay, I think I can do it. But I'm a firm believer of is it takes a village, and you and I can say exactly the same thing, almost using the same words, but I guarantee you my children will listen to what you have to say more than I have to say, because I'm a parent. It's white noise. It just becomes over and over. So I don't care, as long as if you're my child's coach, as long as our values align, I'm okay that they understand and learn from you, because my goal as a parent is just to get you to learn. And so I was in corporate America for 22 plus years. And so my goal is to leverage those things that I've learned over the course of my life to help young people and student athletes specifically understand one is mental performance, how to get through tough times, and then also how to apply the things that you and I have had to figure out over the course of our lives to give them a jump start. They're not going to pay attention to everything. They're just going to, hopefully over time, just like we have, you'll remember, I remember when I heard that, now's the time that I need to apply it. Even though I could have applied it before, I didn't need it until now. So that summarizes what I do. But who am I? That's always a good question.
I wanted to touch on that one thing that you said there. I think that is a big deal. Is I think where you said how you said a lot of parents are not willing to, or not even, maybe just not in their purview to pay or to have their kids get coached. I think a lot of that comes down to, and I think you touched on it, but most parents want to think their kids are perfect. I think they want to think my kids are, like it's a reflection of you. And so it's hard to say, hey, my kid's struggling. I can't help them. This person probably could, but there's an ego thing there. And I think that's a big thing for people to hear, because like you said, whatever's best for your kid, let's try to, do that. And that's M42 Adventures. I don't know if you know a lot about it, but it is basically, the whole concept is mentors. And so I love what you're saying right now, because if you can get somebody that doesn't know what, a lot of these communities are a person at the top trying to teach, which I admire, and I'm not trying to belittle it, but the way we set up M42 Adventures, and Ryan Mickler helped start this, he was a partner on it, was we bring in people who are experts in that field. That's why Seth Studley is a mentor in M42 Adventures. He teaches, mental health and mindset, because he's got 30 years of experience. Your knowledge, for me to try to go out there and read a book or listen, I can get some basics, but the amount of knowledge you've gotten over your lifetime, I mean, the saying is, you've forgotten more than I can ever learn, So yeah, I think that's a big deal for people to hear, is if your kids are struggling, if you got some things that you see that you're just not qualified to teach, reach out, just swallow your pride, do it for your kids, do it for yourself. I like how you said, you've been to these Dad's Edge and all these different things. Lots of people don't do that. Lots of people, they want to just, most people stop after college. They don't read another book. They don't take another course. And it's like, why? What would make you think you got it figured out? So not to cut you off there, but I love, I already like you. I already like you, man. So you're speaking my language.
And since we're on that, and I know that you don't necessarily have an agenda, so it's organic.
I don't.
About struggling. And I would even challenge, I'll use the bell curve analogy, is you have the people that are just type A, they're running full steam. They seem like everything's good. And it probably is. Like it's they're focused. They're always trying to learn. They're doing their thing. And then you have the other end, the ones that struggle, that just seem and feel like a train wreck. So nobody pays attention to these people, and everybody pays attention to these people. So the problem is the 80% of the people in the middle, that if we could move that line just a little bit more over to the high performers, imagine what we can do to a community, society, a team. So when I was leading sales teams in corporate America, is everybody wanted me to focus on the bottom. So all my time was spent trying to manage them either up or out. And then the good ones, I barely paid any attention to, or I paid all my attention to, because you had these two people. Well, if I started to figure out, if I could move, on a team of 8 or 10, if I could move the 6 in the middle, I'm going to have more success long-term than I am on focusing on either end. So I would even say, is if you're a parent, if you're a friend, and you have somebody that you're like, you know what, they're doing well, but how do I just move them a little bit more to get more out of their life? And if you're listening to this and you feel like you're that person where things are going pretty good, but just imagine if you could just level up one more skill, just a little bit more, how much more would that do to your quality of life? Whether that's, if you're looking at money, if you're looking at your relationships. So I like to say, focus in the middle. And unfortunately, the middle gets overlooked. And those are the ones that people say, well, I never knew that they were struggling. I saw that they got good grades in school. They were good athletes. They were outgoing. And next thing you know is they're depressed, or they have, a hidden vice that they don't want people to know about because it's their way to escape. Let's not forget about those in the middle. And I'm sure in M42, there's a lot of those guys that come to you that are usually on the bottom end, that just need help. They just don't know how to get out of their own way. And then you got the middle that are just looking for something else. So if we can grow that middle, it's not as hard, and you can see a lot of success quickly too.
Yeah. And I like how you said that's that's really the meat on the bone. You're right. We focus on this side or that side, and we're missing the biggest chunk, which is I've never thought of it that way, but yeah, you're absolutely right.
Because I'm a guy in the middle.
Yeah,
I
right.
really am.
Well, most people are 80%.
On any given day, I'm either on this side doing pretty good or I'm on this side not doing very good.
Absolutely.
And so I just try to keep moving and inching forward for progress because that's just where I am at.
Yeah, and I think it's good for people to hear, like I said, I'm very, very good friends with Ryan Mickler and some of these people that are high performers. They're doing very well, but they still have bad days. They still have bad weeks. They still, trip and fall. Sometimes it's one step forward, two steps back. And I think it's good for people to hear out there where we see a lot of the highlight reels, right? We shine on all the positives, and it's like, that's not reality. Reality is usually a lot harder than what you're seeing. And so it's good for people to realize.
And if you feel like you're in that top performer category, create a new bell curve, find a new room where you're not at the top, where somebody else can help push and pull you along. And it's just changing. And again, that's where communities like yours is. If the circle of friends that you have that you went to high school with or college with or in your neighborhood, and you just feel like, man, I seem like I'm the alpha dog in this group, go find another group and humble yourself to go, man, these guys have it together. And then you learn. And that's what I'm hoping to do with student athletes, is whether they're struggling or not, is to show them that there's opportunities for growth. Because if you want to, change your career and continue going from high school to college to being a professional, your room changes in each one, because you might be a big dog in the high school, and then all of a sudden you go to college, you're just another freshman. 5-star, 2-star, 3-star, it does not matter. When you walk in, you're just another kid trying to find a spot, because that school is trying to replace you every single year. They're trying to find the next best recruit to replace you. And when you go to the pro, it's even more cutthroat than that. And I haven't partaken in either one of those rooms, but I just know from talking to people of just how challenging that it is. And that's just somebody that's why I like student athletes. They're always looking for that next room, looking for the competition. What do they need to do to get better along the way? Because your average person normally doesn't have some kind of challenge like that they have to face.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I'm not big into sports. I'm not a big sports guy. My son is a huge football. He loves football, and I love it because he loves it. And so I'm trying to dabble in it and whatnot. But you're exactly right, because these are young kids. A lot of them are going to go into situations that are very rare and crazy. I mean, I see all the time, we'll be watching, my kid will pull up a football highlight and he's like, yeah, this is this quarterback. He's, 20 years old or 22 years old. And I'm like, to play in front of 60,000 people on a Sunday, for the Super Bowl, and you're 23 years old, it's like, how do you even process that? And then the other side of that, though, is like we just saw with Sanders. I know his last name, Sanders, right, in the draft. He thought he's going to go number 1, number 2, ends up going into the hundreds, whatever it was. And if somebody like you was there with him and could help him, because that's going to be so mental, that's going to be such a deflating moment for him. And it's like, hey man, you're okay. You're still the same person. Let's learn from some of the mistakes you made, whether it was, some cockiness or whatever kind of played a role, whatever kind of brought this on. Let's learn from it. And just that person that can mentor them and say, hey, get out on the field. And I saw a couple interviews after of him, and he's shaking all the reporters' hands. Somebody's talking to him. Somebody's saying, hey, man, you needed to dial it back. This was a good experience for you to learn. But, man, how invaluable to have that at such a, 16 to 25, that is where the mold is being shaped completely. And so I love that. I love that that's where you picked to go, because that, I think, is so needed.
There's an interesting perspective of that, with Sanders, and him being picked. I think he went to the Browns, but the aspect of starting somewhere when you're good, you know, and he's a good player. When you're good and you start somewhere way low, so you have a lot of ability to climb instead of being placed up on top of the mantle and expected to perform at a level that you don't even know yet. You know, so I think that really worked out well.
Could
for
be a
him.
positive.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like my son's biggest sports team. We just went there is the Tennessee Titans, and you know I tease him all the time. I'm like, bro, you can pick another team. Man.
Yeah,
I don't know anything
exactly.
about football, but I know that's not a good one.
man.
You know, but he had a
The
player
Panthers,
on there.
maybe.
Yeah.
That's
It's
my
like,
team.
It's like, bro, throw a dart, you know, and we could probably do better. But he loves them. He's holding strong, and they just got. Is it Cam Ward? Am I saying, or is that who they just got? And he said the same thing. You know, he says hopefully he can get in there and build that up. But yeah, I think these are such young kids, and they are kids, and what a tremendous amount of responsibility and stress is put on them. And for somebody to come in there, good or bad, that's kind of where I think it's like, hey, you might be at the top right now. That's good. Enjoy it. Be present. But tomorrow could be a different day, and you could, you know, be at the bottom. And ultimately, and I tell my son this all the time, I don't care if you play football or not. I don't care if you play soccer or not, or I don't, you know, just be a good person, you know, try to get the fundamentals in line of life, you know, to where you're a contributing member to society. And I think if you can have that foundation, and I'm not a religious person. I grew up LDS. I haven't been to church in 20 years, but I love Christian. I am a Christian, and I love what they teach. You know, if you follow those fundamentals, your life will be better. Like whether you believe in anything else, you know, if you follow those beliefs and you have that compass, and I tell my boys it's a compass, and you know where north is, which is be a good dad, be a good friend, you know, all these different things, your life will be better. And if you can get into these young kids, especially some of these kids that come from some pretty rough neighborhoods, you know, and backgrounds, and they can find that, what a powerful position.
Yeah, because it's the opposite of the social media narrative that's out there. And it really, that narrative has been going on since really there's been movies. If you look back at Hollywood, it's always, what's the image when you think of John Wayne? It's the cowboy riding off by themselves into the sunset. And, you know, they're tough. They don't need the woman. They give them a kiss and then off they go. And that is so counter to what real life is.
So
all
sad.
about.
Yeah, it's lonely.
Yeah, I mean, that's not winning.
Nope, no,
that's
100%.
not cool.
No,
It's,
no.
you know, and
that's my worst nightmare.
Oh my goodness, yes, I can imagine.
Yeah.
But it's a lie that we tell ourselves and that we choose to believe, and that social media continues to reinforce, is that, you know, it's all about the grind and you can do this by yourself and nobody else, you know, nobody's coming to save you, which there's some truth to that. But if you surround yourself with the right people, there's plenty of people to come save you when things go wrong. And that's why I cringe as well when I see certain things, when it talks about, when you see people saying, well, nobody's going to come to save you, so be prepared. Just say be prepared. I mean, you don't have to add that fear of nobody's coming to save you. It's, hey, it's your right and your duty to lead your family and lead your community, so you need to be prepared.
Yeah, and I see what you're saying. I just went to Moab over Memorial Weekend for a bear hunt, and took my boys, me and my 3 boys went out there, and we were driving, and it's a 6-hour drive, and I had different family members all kind of spread out, you know, leaving at different times. And my boys said, "Hey Dad, what if we break down?" And I says, "Well, first of all, I think I can get us through it depending on what it is. But second of all, we've got a lot of people that are around us that are coming this way that will come help us." And there's comfort in both, you know, and they don't have to be mutually exclusive. You know, it doesn't have to be, I can do it all alone and my dad shows up and he's got a better jack and I'm like, get away. I can do this. You know, I'm a man. It's like, no, come help me. I love, and I think like you're saying, it is so valuable. And I think they probably feel that in sports. At least again, I didn't play sports, but I think getting in there and really diving into, you know, hey, this isn't just a teammate, but this is family. These, you know, how do you rely on these brothers and sisters and create that community that is bigger than the game?
Sure. And that's every athlete I've spoken to that is out of the game, the main, of course they miss the competition of it all, but they miss the locker room. They miss the community. They miss, everybody being a part of everything. So just like in corporate America, once you leave a job, all of your friends that you worked with for years, they disappear. They're gone. And it's not anything malicious. It's just, hey, my world's here. I'm talking about all of these things that are pertinent to me. And now you're not in that world to really understand and give context. Just like with athletics, with family, with all these different things, is once you decide that it's time to move on, you've got to be ready to find another community. And I think that's what happens to a lot of people. The military, same thing, is when they leave, they are lost, and being in seclusion in your own thoughts is a dangerous place to be if you're struggling with something already.
Yeah, 100%. I just did my live Zoom call in the Genesis right before this podcast, and I head to Hawaii in a couple weeks with Ryan Mickler, and there's 16 of us going. And we go over there hunting, and exactly like you're saying, it's like we meet there to hunt. That's the overall objective. But 90% of the value 80%, I do like hunting, but 80% of the value I get is sitting at camp, having these conversations by a fire that you don't get to have with these people in any other setting. And you're exactly right. It is so valuable. And when I look back and on a hunt at the end of the year, I'm not like, well, man, I wish I would have hit that deer or, whatever. You do a little bit, but 90% of it is, man, I miss those guys. I miss those conversations. And you're exactly right. I think it is so healthy to have that in your life. I hadn't had that. I had some friends, like you said, I think we default to, these were my high school friends, and you just kind of have these little groups that you kind of move along with. But when you start going to these, like Dad's Edge, I haven't been to that one, but I've gone to several of Ryan's and some others. And you start, I was telling Chase, trying to get him to come out to Hawaii. And I says, hey, and he said, can I say that, what you said, Chase?
Yeah, go ahead.
He says, I don't have friends. He says, I don't have friends. And I says, this is how you get them. You come out and I says, there's going to be 16 guys there. You're not going to like all 16, I assure you. But you might find one or two, and what value is that going to bring to your life? And then you multiply that, and you multiply that, and pretty soon you got 4 or 5 brothers that it's just life-changing.
And that's why you got to go do stuff. As an adult male, we have to go do stuff. And it's 100%. Also easier is that I know that we're looking at each other in the camera, but guys, we're side talkers. We do more when we're working alongside someone. That's why campfires are so powerful. Nobody has to look at each other. Everybody's going deep, but they're staring into the fire. Rarely do you see guys make eye contact. That's what I love about the outdoors. Fishing, hunting, just anything, is you get to talk, but not have to have that,
uncomfortable, awkward silence. Yeah.
Or just
it's a welcoming environment.
The women going to have tea and cake and sitting across from one another and having these deep conversations. Guys just aren't wired that way. But if you can create environments like an M42 adventure or anything, is that if you create chances for guys to have downtime away from all of their normal day-to-day responsibilities, you're going to see people over time get more comfortable. And that comes from, once you're comfortable with a few of the guys and you guys are authentic with one another, now you're giving someone permission to be authentic with somebody else, with a group of people that they don't know. It's a little risky, but you're like, you know what? I don't know these people anyways. I probably will never see them again if I choose not to. So I'll go ahead and get this off my chest. And then you see the deeper connections develop, and you get to see friendships and brotherhoods move in a very positive way. And we have to put ourselves, like you said, in those positions, because your average neighborhood buddy, you might be able to go have a beer with or do whatever, but you're not going to have deep conversations. Because I've had plenty of friends that I've tried to, and they get really weird really quick because they're thinking, I just came to talk about the weather and chit chat and talk about football, but you're wanting to go a little further than I'm comfortable. And it's not even me asking them deep questions. It's just, hey, here's something that's going on and I'm not really sure what to do. And then like, and you just see them get awkward. And next thing you know is they don't answer your calls anymore.
Yeah. 100.
They don't answer.
Well, and Seth, and the way I met Seth was in Hawaii. It was, I think 2 years ago, we were getting ready to go out and we had somebody, I'm pretty sure they backed out last minute. Ryan knew Seth and called Seth and says, hey, you've talked about wanting to get into hunting, bow hunting, and would you want to come on this trip? Has he told you this story?
He hasn't, no.
And so he says, yeah, I'm in. He says, I was in a place in my life where I was just, I wanted to say yes. He had never bow hunted. He went and bought a bow like 30 days before, never pulled it back, shows up, gets off the airplane, walks up. I'm like, hey, what's up, man? Like you say, just kind of the chit chat because we're not there yet. And over the course of a week, there was about a couple days into it where I'm like, man, this guy's just good. He's a good soul. And I had shot a deer like the fourth day and I hit it back a little bit far. And I says, hey, I'm clear over here. And we have one vehicle. It's really hard to find rental cars on Molokai, just in case anybody wondered. Our rental car's a 1997 Ford F-150. It's like $1,000 a week. It's crazy. But we have one car, and I had it, and I always go to the end because I drop everybody off, and then I'm at the very end, and I hit this deer, and I sent a message out and said, hey, I hit this deer. I'm going to be an hour or two looking for it. Just hang out and wait for me. And I'm walking around, and it's hot and humid, and I'm looking and looking and looking. And I look over, and I see somebody, and I'm like, I sent a text to the group message, and I said, hey, who's over here? And Seth said, oh, hey, you said you hit a deer, and I knew where you were. I was by a radio tower. And he says, I just walked over here. And I'm like, dude, you were like a couple miles away. And he's like, well, I didn't know, you said I figured you needed help and I'm coming to help. And he came over and we sat down on a rock and I'm like, bro, you're awesome. I get cold chills talking about it, and I'm like, bro, you're a good dude. And right then the barrier's gone. We're friends. It's like, you just, you got my back at the bar, whatever, it's like, you just proved yourself. And now it's turned into, he's come every year. He's come out and stayed, at my house in Utah. He's a partner in M42 Adventures, which I don't know if you knew, but he has a small ownership in it. And, like you're saying, it's just one of those things that is very hard to happen over a beer watching a football game, and so like you're saying, you have to go do, and that's my mantra is we live in a world where you read the book, you listen to the podcast, that's a start, but go to the events, hire the mentor, go on the trip. That's where you get your money's worth. That's where the results happen.
Yeah, it's taking action because we consume. There's I can't remember who I learned it from, so it is not a Jeff original, but we have to stop being consumers and be contributors. If you're just constantly, and there's nothing wrong with listening to podcasts and educating yourself and going through it, well, that just makes us feel good. But if you really want to make a change in your life, you have to put those things into action. And that's where when you go somewhere, you get inspired and motivated of, okay, well, when I don't feel like doing it, how are these guys managing to be a good husband, father, friend, community member, whatever it may be, when they don't feel like it? And then you start to learn real life skills that can help you, because until you really hear someone that and you have, like you said, that physical interaction with, that's when it starts to sink in, because then you see it in your eyes, and you can see it when you watch a video or you listen to a podcast, but it is not the same than when you're sitting, like you said, on a rock with a guy that just walked 2 miles to help you look miles potentially for this deer. And you may never find it, but you get to chat, you get to learn a little bit, because you're just walking and looking. So it creates great opportunities. And that's where just doing anything with people makes it fun. So you can accomplish the same thing if you're not into sports and you're not into the outdoors. Go take a cooking class with somebody. And as you're sitting there talking and you burn something, then you have a good conversation there. So it's doing things with people that are like-minded. And I'd worked with a young man that I really appreciated him because he was very honest. He's like, I just don't know how to make friends. And we started talking about what is he like? Well, I didn't realize that he was a black belt in Taekwondo. He was an accomplished guitar player, and he even taught in Taekwondo classes. And so when we talked about him, he didn't like to make friends in where he's teaching, which I get, I understand. And I said, well, you like guitars, right? And he said, yes. I go, well, do you have your favorite guitar shop in town? And he rattled off what that was. And I said, well, have you ever gone in there and just started talking to the person behind the counter? And he's like, no, why would I do that? And I was like, well, they work in a guitar store. You like guitars. They probably like guitars. So
Yeah.
it's an easy way to strike up a conversation. And he had never really thought about that. And so from that, he ended up like joining a college band because he started looking for like-minded people that he didn't just know how to do that. Some of us are just socially awkward. I was one of those for a long time where I'm an introvert by nature. So I'm just not going to talk to people. I have no problem standing in a corner at a party and not talking to a soul. And that's why I like to cook. And then I'll find whoever's cooking at a party and I'll stand next to them because I'm thinking, okay, I can talk about food. And then I can also, they probably don't want to talk to people. So they're not up for idle chit chat. So we'll probably become
We
fast
fit.
friends.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, let's step away from this conversation real quick and talk about a few things we have going on with M42 Adventures and the Genesis. So as you know, M42 Adventures, we are doing a lot of adventures and taking people on a lot of cool experiences. We just got back from Costa Rica, surfing. We are headed to Hawaii. We are headed to Alaska this summer. All sold out, all done. But if you want to get in there and see how you can come on some of these adventures, you can sign up for the Genesis. It's our online community. Go to M42Adventures.com. It's completely free, and it's an amazing thing. We have over 250 members now. We actually just did our 250 member giveaway where we're bringing a husband and wife out to Southern Utah to stay at Elevation 40 Zion, a Airbnb here in Southern Utah. And we're going to go ride UTVs and shoot guns and go hiking and cook an amazing dinner with a private chef on an open fire. So lots of amazing things happening there. We're helping a lot of people. There's financial mentorship. There's mental health. It's not just outdoors and adventure. There's also fitness, things like that. So if you're interested in any of that and you don't want to have to pay for it, you can come into the Genesis and sign up. We'd love to see you in there. Stay tuned for more announcements. Again, we have a newsletter where we send out a lot of information and you can sign up for that as well. All right, let's get back to this conversation. And that's it. I think that's the mindset of growth. That's where a lot of people would go into that saying, oh, this just didn't work out. I went to the party. I stood there. Nobody walked up to me and said, hey, how are you? So it's not meant to be. And it's like, no, you have to engage. And it's like, well, it's hard to just walk up to somebody. And it's like, you figured out, I think that's great for people to hear. I can see Chase here, just his wheels running, but it's like, that's good for me to hear, to help people to where it's like, listen, find these little hacks, trick yourself, like go over to the grill, go over to the barbecue and try that guy. That might be an easier entry into a conversation than just walking up to the guy out in the middle, the middle of the floor. And so I think that's, I think that's very encouraging for people to hear because most people would love human interaction, but they want it on their terms, which is fine. It's like, you don't have to be go to a deer camp and sit there and stand up in the middle of 8 guys and, do a stand-up comedy sketch. Like, that would be uncomfortable for anybody. But maybe you go over to the guy who likes to cook, who's a little introverted, and you guys talk about, how you're searing the steak. That works. And so that's really cool to hear. That's a good perspective.
You talk about hacks. There's a great hack, and I think this came from Ninja Selling, which is a big course that a lot of salespeople take. And it's the acronym FORD. So if you're ever looking to start a conversation with someone, and I'm a big believer in having predetermined questions that are good generic questions to have. And that just comes from my sales is what's your opening, what's your close, what are going to be your probing questions, and just have a group of those in your pocket. But if you don't have those, it's FORD. So you can talk about family, occupation, recreation, or destination, which is like travel. So if you can just remember FORD and then hit on any one of those, most people will talk about it. And then there's a great book called What Got You Here Won't Get You There, of trying not to one up the other person, meaning that most people, like you said, that you went on a Moab bear hunt. And so to me, all of a sudden, because I'm trying to connect with you, start talking about and interrupt you and start talking about a hunt that I was on. It's better to go, oh man, well, tell me more about that. It's that phrase of just tell me more, and just go, oh man, I love to hunt. I've gone on some crazy stuff, but what was one of the things that you got the most out of? And I'm trying to, and young people don't like to usually interact, especially with adults. So I go, the better your questions are, the least amount that you have to talk.
Yeah. Right.
And you'll leave a party having said maybe a dozen or 2 words, and everybody will be like, did you talk to Jeff? Holy smokes. He is the nicest guy at the whole party. And I didn't say anything. I just got you to talk about you, and I got to stand there and be quiet. So it was perfect.
Yeah. And I 100% agree with that. I've read a couple books on that where it's, that's a great, like you said, it's, and eventually you can talk about you, but that's a good entry into, this relationship that's going to be a positive and and so, yeah, I love that. So I want to jump back on this. So Christian coach. So the coaching is mostly student athletes. Is that
athletes, parents, and coaches? So just that whole, anything to do with athletics is what I like to live.
Is that, so is that more mentality, financial, what, all of it?
It's primarily mental performance, like giving them hacks, like we talked about, of how to manage through tough times, how to stay in I like to use the analogy of traffic lights, stay in a green light because you're going to move into the yellow and the red eventually, but how do you move through those? And then on top of just mental performance, it's just regular life skills around time management, goal setting a vision, your mission, your principles, just a lot of the basic things in life that everybody needs to know.
I love that. And then author, what have you written?
So I wrote a book called Unleash Potential back in 2020 is when I published it. So it was right at the beginning of COVID. So I had all these, because I love self-help. So I learned that from my mom. So grew up in multi-level marketing back in the 70s and 80s, was Amway. Everybody did it, but then it was all about positivity. And so Zig Ziglar and Skip Ross. And so she always would listen to those cassettes. And so at 8 to 10 years old, I'm listening to Zig Ziglar tapes. And so I've just always been a big participant in self-help and positivity. And so with all that, all these people kept telling me, it's like, oh, you've got so much knowledge, you should help other people. And that's what I loved about being in management and sales. I got to help see other people develop and move on. And through that, decided I didn't want to write a book because I'm just Jeff from Orlando, but had talked to a guy that was helping me build my website. And his name's Adam Davis. You should have him on at some point. He's written 10 plus devotionals. He works with first responders and military, and he's got a crazy story, but super great guy. So anyways, I'm talking to him and he's like, you need to write a book. It's like, no, I'm not writing a book. I'm not former military. I'm not former athlete. I'm not a former billionaire or current billionaire. It's like, what's the point? He's like, you have a book. And so after that experience, I'm convinced that everyone should write a book. Everybody has a story to tell that will impact someone. And so I wrote it with no grand visions of selling. I wanted to sell millions of copies, but realistic. And so at this point, 5 years in, I've sold probably close to 600 now, which for self-published and not much marketing is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome
to know. And through it, it's just a lot of the things that you and I are talking about. It's life lessons that I've learned, 4 key areas that I've seen through my life and watching others, that if any of those are off, they're not going to reach their full potential. And so that's knowing your strengths and weaknesses, understanding communication, so internal and external, so what you say to yourself and then what comes out of your mouth, and then self-development. So it's, again, what we've talked about is, who do you surround yourself with? Do you have a good team? Do you have a confidant? And then are you taking ownership of your own development? And then the last one is just setting a proper course of just formally having a plan to move forward. And what do you do? And so in it, I just shared super quick, easy to read. If you like to read, I'd be happy to send you a copy.
Yeah, I would love it. I'll buy it. Is it on Amazon?
It's on Amazon. Mm-hmm.
I'll buy it. I'll support you. I'd rather buy it than have you send me one. So you do that for me, Chase. Yeah, I love that, man. I love 2 things there. I love that you have this message to share and that live that life, but also that you did it. That just shows a lot to me that for me, looking back again, what could be my regrets? And if you just check them off and you eliminate those, that's that can't be a regret now. You did it. And I admire that no matter what, even what's in the book, it's like, it's already admirable. And do you have kids?
I do. So I have now a 17-year-old son and a 14-year-old daughter.
Yeah. So do you know Trevor Farnes? Have you heard of Trevor Farnes with Mountain Ops?
I haven't. Oh,
okay.
I have. Yes.
Have you?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So he's the founder of Mountain Ops. He's actually coming out to Hawaii with us in here in a couple of weeks, but just a good dude that I had on the podcast, met him, and he wrote a book called Conquer Code. Isn't that what it is? I think that's what it's called. The Conquer Code.
I think that is what it's called.
And he went into the mindset of, he wrote it for himself and his family, kind of a, almost like something for his kids to read down the road that can say, hey, this is what dad was thinking. This is what, he wanted to give the world. And he says, if you go into it with that mentality, you can't lose. And I was like, man, that hit me pretty hard, because your kids can read that down the road and say, this is what my daddy, put on paper, and they'll always have that. And that's a win right there.
Well, it's generations. It's not
100%.
My kids. It's when I'm
grandpa
dead and gone.
Yeah.
Then
right.
It's great grandpa. And it's like, oh, man, he wrote a book. And like you said, is for me, the biggest win for the book was, it was during COVID. My kids got to see me sit down and do this. And the way Adam coaches you through writing, he's like, do 300 words a day for 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. And so they saw me. I would come in, I'd sit down, I'd put headphones on, and then I would just type. Some days I'd be here for an hour, some days, and then he's like, just type and then be done. And, we're at COVID. And at the time, my son was, what is it now? 5. So he was 11, 12 years old. So he's playing on his iPad, sitting in the chair behind me. And he was sitting there when I typed the last word. And so I typed the last word and I sat back and I turned around. I was like, buddy, I did it.
Yeah.
I finished the book. And he so dramatically looked up from playing Minecraft and he's like, Dad, even if nobody buys it, you did it.
Well, that's awesome.
Like,
that's rad.
Like, that was the purpose of
so
writing
much.
the book, was for him to say that. And whether he remembers that or not, I'll never forget it. And it's one of those things that, like you said, is that if you want good kids, you've got to model the way. You've got to show them what it takes to be disciplined and sit down and do something. And it's not just about work, because I was also a victim of what I saw my dad do. He loved us dearly, but he worked all the time. And so I never really had a strong relationship with my dad. He was my hero. I know he loved me. He passed away in 1991. So I was a senior in high school. So we never got to develop the relationship that I wanted to have. And I always said, well, I'm never going to work that much. Well, technically, when I was here spending time going to sporting events with my kids, my brain was on email. It was in my phone. It was, do this, do that. And that's awful. And so if you're going to spend time with your kids, spend time with your kids, put that stuff away, because they don't care how much money we make. They don't care about the things that we have. All they want is our time. That's it.
100%. 100%.
And I went down a rabbit trail or rabbit, whatever you want to call a hole, over the last couple of weeks and been watching Outdoor Boys. Have you watched that on YouTube?
I haven't, but I heard they hung up, right?
Everyone's really sad, and I want to know why. I've never seen it either.
Yeah.
Watch it. So as a dad, I wish I would have seen this when my kids were little, because I would have done so much different, because he's all about the outdoors and bushcrafting and doing all these things. And he was a highly successful lawyer as well. Moved back to Alaska with his family. He's got 3 boys, but just to watch him interact with them and spending all this time with them it's so cool. And it's so valuable to do those type things. And that's why he quit, because he's like, my original reason to do this was to spend time with my kids. And so as they've gotten older, he was putting out a video every Saturday for 12 years. And so he's like, I'm to the point now where it's now taking me away from spending time with them to make videos for you. So it's counterproductive to what I originally started. So that goes back to what we had talked about before about having a vision for your life and principles. Well, family is a big principle for him. So when he started to feel that tug pulling away, he didn't really care about what it would, quote unquote, cost him financially. He just saw the impact it was going to have on his family. And so that's why he stepped away. And he's like, yeah, I'll probably, release some of the things that you guys have been following that are unfinished. But he's like, I'm just going to batch it at the end of the year. And his son's got a super popular YouTube channel now, Outdoor Tom, I think it is. And so he's like, I'm going to work with him and help him grow his YouTube channel. So now he's shifted from doing bushcraft and camping with his kids to now he's doing YouTube production with his son. So he gets to spend all that time with him, which is really cool. But you would love it. You would absolutely love the channel.
I really respect people that can walk away. I really do.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah. 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 That's what I did. So do you know anything about my backstory at all?
No, please tell me.
I don't want to one up you. I don't want to be that guy.
No,
We just talked about that guy. I lost everything. I had a pretty successful business. From 25, I started when I was 25 up to 31. And when I turned 31, which was 2011, I held on for a few years after the recession, but a few years later, it just caught up with me. Lost everything, homeless, lost my, everything. I was $600,000 in debt. And had that conversation on the couch with my wife. My son was just born. He was a month old. And I just said, hey, we need to really figure out where we went wrong here and correct the path. And so I went back to work, and I worked about every day for 6 years. The longest I went was 3 years without a day off. So 1,000 days in a row of working. But I was building for a purpose. And in January of 2016, I sold 65% of my construction companies that I had built. And in February of 2017, me and my wife, and at that time, 2 boys, left to go travel the world. And I didn't work. I didn't do any kind of influencing. My social media was all private. I had taken my money and bought vacation rentals, and I had 8 of those. And then the income still from the companies. And I haven't worked for 9 years. So we've continued to travel. We've traveled full time. We've been to 73 countries now, all 50 states. And that's my whole purpose in life is time with I now have 4 kids. We just had a little girl. She was born in January, so we had to wait. The doctors recommended it until she was 2 months old. So we left in March and left for a few months and went to Costa Rica for a month. And that's what I do. That's my passion is exactly what you're saying, where time with family and friends. And, I've given up millions of dollars, in income that I could have stayed and made and bought more things, but I have enough passive income. And still to this day, I started M42 Adventures, last January. When I got home December. We wanted to have
or something, but
yeah, well, by the time I got it incorporated, but yeah, I came home in January. We knew we were going to have another child. I talked to Ryan Mickler and said, hey, I'd like to do what you're doing and start a community and help people get outside and off the screens and spend time in travel and see the world. And I says, I'll sign up for a 1-year contract. So I did a 1-year deal while my daughter was being, created in the oven. And then she came in January and we left again. And I just got home a week ago. I'm here for a couple weeks and then I leave again for another year, 10 months. But yeah, man, that to me is everything. That's the purpose of life is time and memories with those we love. So you're speaking my language, that is.
Yeah, man.
You
definitely need to write a book.
Yeah, I don't even know. It seems, I don't even know where to,
I'll break it down.
Start. Yeah.
Super easy. And I can even connect. And if you have Adam on, you can talk to him about it. But
okay.
I'll tell you what he coached me through. So one is just open a file on your computer and type the name. So even if you just put M42, whatever, it's irrelevant. The title of the book is irrelevant, but just you start. Then the next step is think of 10 chapters, the title of 10 chapters. You could have more, but I'd kind of narrowed down what I wanted to talk about in 10 chapters. But he's like, just start with 10 and then pick each chapter is probably only going to be about 2,500 words. So the goal is that's a very small, easy read. And if you have more things to say, do another book. He goes, you want a reader-friendly book. And then you want to pick, so this is all about planning, is if you do 2,500 words per chapter, you don't frustrate the reader, because there's nothing more frustrating than if you start a book and one chapter is 5,000 words, the next one's 1,500, and you just kind of like, when is the end of this chapter coming?
Interesting.
So you have the title of 10, so you just type it out. And so literally 1 week he would say, give me the title of 10 chapters, and then that's it. Don't do anything else. And I was like, okay. And so then the next week he's like, okay, now cover 4 points under each one of those chapters. So write down 4 key points that you want to cover in each chapter. So then I got to that point, and then the next week he was like, okay, start writing. And the key to it is to not edit. He's like, you just brain dump on the paper. Don't reread it. Don't edit as you go. He's like, all that you'll do later, because what happens is most people will write a chapter, then they want to go, oh, I misspelled this, or, oh, I forgot that, or he's like, just put it on. You'll figure it out when you reread it. And when you go through the editing process, then you can start to clean it up and look at it. He's like, you just got to get it on the paper. So it's like that rough start too. If you're a carver or a painter, it doesn't look pretty when you start, but by the time you start blending and moving things around, then you're there. And then the other thing is, don't let anybody read it, because then people will start making comments and then you'll be worried. And that's what happened, is that I was going through and I got stuck. So I went back and started rereading one of the chapters. So I started changing things and moving things around, and I got stuck. And so when I called him, I was like, I'm stuck. He's like, why? And so I told him, he's like, I told you not to go back and read it. And so once I kind of powered through that one, then we figured it out. And then once I hit 25 words, he's like, just move on. And he's like, if you have so much to say, then just start another chapter, but just don't fall outside the guidelines.
There's a lot of wisdom in that for people who are trying to do anything, right? It's like most people, I've started 14 businesses in my career, and a lot of people are like, how do I start a business? I don't even know where to start. Now, my answer always is just start. Go get a business license. Just, it's like anything. How do I lose 100 pounds? Start. So I like that's a very good lesson for people to just break it down into manageable things. And then, yeah, I've never thought about it. I've never, it's one of those things where I made something down the road sometime or whatever. Right now I'm trying to be present. You know, I just went to Costa Rica for a month. I was supposed to do a couple podcasts. Chase is probably mad at me, but he kept calling me saying, I need this, I need that. And I'm like, dude, I can't, you know, I'm on the beach and I'm not gonna, that was always one of those things where I never wanted to take any product. You know, people were like, we'll send you backpacks and take a photo of it. And I'm like, no, you know, I don't, if you can send me your backpack and if it ends up in a picture, good for it, but I'm not gonna, you know, go down that route. But, yeah, I love it. Let's get back on you. So what is FCA? What is that?
So it's the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. So it's an international organization that focuses on getting the gospel into schools through athletics. So I'm one of the board members of our local West Orange County chapter, so to speak. And so the goal is that through huddles, so we do lunch huddles where we'll bring a local pastor or somebody to come in and do 12 minutes. So usually we get lunch, like an A lunch and a B lunch, and then we feed them, bring in a ton of pizzas. And then
Is this high school or is
high
this
school
college?
and middle school? And
I
they have
love
them
it.
at college as well.
That's awesome. That's
again,
cool.
It's another opportunity for community for people to come in and to hear the good news, and we feed them. So it's not anything around well, you have to be Christian to come to the huddle. It's, you want free pizza? Now, if you eat free pizza, you're going to listen to a message. So be respectful. Absolutely. And sit there and be quiet. And it's unbelievable to see what happens when kids they want to feel loved. They want to feel connected. They want to be heard. And FCA has just a wonderful mission, is through sports that they engage and equip these young people on how to face life and then ultimately hear the good news about Jesus. And if that's their choice to accept it and move forward, then we're here to support and pray for them and do those things. So it's a massive international organization.
That's awesome. I wonder if they do that here in Utah. I mean, I would imagine something.
I'm sure they've got chapters everywhere. And so usually some states, it just depends. And then some areas it might be in the state, but then as it starts to grow, and
they'll expand.
It does. But it's been around for 50 or 60 years. I mean, it's been around for a long time.
That's awesome. I love that. I'm going to look into that. And then you podcast, huh? You have a podcast then as well?
I do. It's called Pathways to Greatness. And so I started that a couple years ago, very similar to the idea of the book. Is you do a podcast for the benefit that you're going to receive, not for the listeners, because I don't have a ton of downloads.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And
100%.
It's the consistent ones that if you told me that I would have 20 people want to listen to my podcast every single week, that'd be like me showing up to a room full of 20 people. I'd be beside myself excited that 20 people wanted to come listen to somebody that I find interesting. So normally they're always guests. And so the goal of the podcast was to have people on to share what their definition of greatness is. So everybody has a similar definition, but it's not the same. And then also understand and hear people's pathway, because nobody has yet to give me a point A to point B and it's a straight line. Just like your message it's how do you navigate the ups and downs and the twists and turns. And then ultimately by bringing people on and them sharing their story, I just want to encourage people to not quit, to persevere, to try new things, to figure out, is there something that I can do different to manage myself? Because right now I'm in a pretty gnarly switchback and I'm not sure how I'm going to make it through, but I can see the light at the end of the tunnel because, these guys have shared similar stories. And so it's been a lot of fun to consistently do it every week for 3 years. Like I have not missed an episode.
That's crazy. I've been doing it for a year and it's difficult, man. It is. Life gets in the way. It's tough. So, I commend you on that. And, I lost my train of thought. You had said something in your message on, I lost it. Anyway, and that's why I need to write it down. But yeah, I love all that. So what's next? What are you working on right now? What's next for you?
For me, it's continue to get this message out and work through with young people about the importance of just taking ownership and being intentional about it. And the hope is that if we can impact these young people it's going to ultimately impact the future. And then, just trying to be the good neighbor, like you said, is that, I'm a Christian, like we talked about, and we're commanded to be the good neighbor. So it's not waiting for somebody to come to me to be the good neighbor. It's how do I do that outside of my four walls of my home? And as an introvert, it becomes challenging. But if you're able to just be nice, be kind, live the fruits of the Spirit, bring joy, and be honest and sincere and be a good person, that through that we can change the world, one person at a time.
Yeah, and I remember what I was going to say is, that not having that victim mentality, and you had mentioned that you talked about that in your book, where, I think that happens to a lot of people where things are happening to them. And, I believe most of it's just random, and you can shake that with being positive. And like you had said, what's your inner talk and what's your outer talk? Your mind can really sabotage you quickly. And so I love that aspect on, that way of looking at it. I think that's very powerful for people to hear that are stuck, and that's the other thing is, like you're saying, this podcast for me, I didn't want to do it. I'm an extrovert. I never shut up. So I don't have that problem. Whenever I go to hunt camp and stuff, I'm always the one that's jabbering away, but I am very, very protective of my time. And so I had told Ryan, I says, hey, I want to do a community. I want to do something similar to what you're doing, but I want to take people on adventures. And he says, well, then you got to have a podcast. You got to have, social media. You got to take your stuff off private. And I'm like, and I battled for that pretty bad for a couple months there. But the ultimate reasons I agreed to do it was I do want to help people. And if anything that I say could help somebody, great. And then I want to have these kind of conversations with people that you can learn something from anyone, and my dad always told me that. And I 100% believe it. And if you go into stuff with an open mind as a student, and, I always tell my kids they read a 300-page book and they're like, I didn't get 300 pages of information out of it. And I'm like, did you get 5? And they're like, yeah, I probably got 5. And I'm like, that's 5 that you wouldn't have gotten if you wouldn't open the book, and you talked on that in the beginning, where if you can tweak yourself 1%, 2%, at the end of, 5 or 6 years, you won't recognize who you were. And I think that's good for people to hear. When I first started this podcast, I had a buddy in San Diego say, he says, I hope you'll get some real people on your podcast. And I says, what does that mean? And he says, nothing against some of those people that like run a marathon every day, or they just, those are amazing people. And I don't want to take anything away from them. But I also want people to understand that they are people too. They have bad days. They, and like you said, I like how you said, there's the 10% here and the 10% here on the bell curve. And most of the time, the 10% that we see on podcasts are on this side of the bell curve. And I like talking to the people in here because I think that's going to help more people. A lot of us are going through divorce or weight struggles or financial problems, or, that's the reality of most of us humans. And we all want to, most of us want to do better and try to fix our lives. And if you can talk to somebody that is not perfect, and that's been there, and they can say, hey, I've been through a divorce and this is how I got through it, or I lost 100 pounds. It's like that. Those are the people who I relate to. So I 100% agree on that.
Everybody likes a comeback story.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And when I wrote my book and I told you that I wasn't a millionaire, wasn't an ex-Navy SEAL, all the things that you see people with popular. And I started to think there's more Jeffs from Orlando than there are former Navy SEALs that can run 200 plus miles. I mean, it's really cool to hear those stories. But like you said, is like one of my favorite interviews that I had is just a buddy from Kentucky. And he's chill, but super wise. And there's so much wisdom that he had that nobody other than his family and the people that he worked with would have ever heard it, because he doesn't have a platform, but he's just as wise as the next person that has 1 million followers on social media. He's just not a good marketer. And that's what it comes down to it. And that's also not his goal either, is to do that. But it doesn't, to your point, does not lessen the impact of the words that he has to say.
Yeah, have you heard that country song that says, we actually just heard it in Moab, my boys were singing it, but it was talking how it says, there's a lot of famous people in my hometown. Have you heard that country song? And it talks
I know what
about
you're
how
talking about. I just don't know
it's
what it's
talking
called.
about like his preacher and his buddy that's a cop, and and it's all these people that are famous to him. And that's 100% true. It's like I told my boy this, I get emotional, but I says, I says, who would you want to meet? What athlete would you want to meet? And he says, whoever he likes. And I says, I would not trade 1 hour with you for anybody on this earth. And he's like, what? And I'm like, I says, I would rather play catch with you than any football player you can tell me. And I believe, and that's true, and he was just like, well, that doesn't make sense. And it's like, you're my famous person. I told him, I said, and we talked about this with my dad, his grandpa, up bear hunting, and I says, isn't it fun? We get to be home for a couple of weeks from travel and you get to spend time with grandpa. And they said, yeah, we love it. And they love him to death. And I says, these are the people that are who I want to be around. These are the people. And I think there's, people need to understand that your wife, your kids, your pastor, your bishop, your coach, these people that influence you daily, those are the ones that you should be listening to and talking to way more than, necessarily some podcast or something like that. These people that touch your lives daily.
I saw a reel on Instagram about a week or so ago, and the guy said it took me 40 years to realize that I don't need a picture of the birthday cake and the candle.
Yeah, I saw that.
I mean,
I did that.
It was so good. And so my son just had his birthday party. And so, we always want to take a picture of the kid behind the cake and all that. But while she's doing that, I'm videoing all of his buddies that are at the party because I thought of that. And that's the power of social media, of sharing a simple message that it impacted one person, that now I thought differently about how I would look at birthdays now. And I
did the same thing. I've got a video in my phone right now. We were up at bear camp. My brother, who's 51, had a birthday up there. My mom brought out the cake. And I says, oh, hey, have you guys seen that video? And my brother says, I saw that. And we all sang around a campfire, and I filmed and I cannot tell you how many times my grandpa passed away 5 years ago, and he was my just best friend. And I cannot tell you how many times I have been like filming, catching a fish or something with him, and I'm filming the fish and the line, and I am literally about to tip out of my seat saying, film grandpa. I want, he's gone. I can never film him fishing again.
Yeah.
I cannot tell you how many times I've been filming something and I look on these videos and I want it to show, I can see his hands. And I'm like, Rick, just turn the camera 3 inches and let me see his beautiful face. And I didn't. And I'm like, lesson learned. It's like, I'm not, when we go to Alaska, I'll film that fish for 2 seconds, and then it's going to be on my dad reeling the fish in, because that's what I want to see. I don't care about the fish.
It's funny you bring that up. That's one of the things I really like about my buddy Lon. He's 69. All my friends are older. When we go shoot, he's always got a smile on his face. So like, it's one thing to have him shoot a really neat gun or something like that. You know what I mean? But his reaction to doing it is way better than the gun whole thing happening. Yeah. You know what I mean? And it's just, I wish more people got to realize that, when they're in that moment. Yeah,
it really, that birthday cake thing made me reevaluate how I film everything. Mm. And you're exactly right. And that's why, I think it's great that people like you and me exist, that we're out there really trying to help people and put ourselves out there. It can be scary. It can be all the things that you think of, to put your views and your values and your, all these things out there. But Ryan says it best, he says you're going to get, 80, 90 critics, but those 10 people that you help, it's worth it,
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, for sure. And if you don't have any critics, then you don't really have a message that matters.
Right. Yeah. You're not doing big enough things, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
They're like, okay. Well, I sincerely appreciate you being on here, Jeff. How do people reach you? So I heard your podcast, Pathway to Greatness, right?
Yep. Yep. So that one, it's on Apple, it's on Spotify, and I have a YouTube channel now trying to get that out there because I like watching them. So,
Yeah, me too.
and then
Unleash Potential. Is that
Unleash Potential is the book. It's available
Okay.
on Amazon, or they can reach out to me and I can send them a signed copy. It's cheaper on Amazon.
I'm gonna have Chase. I'll have Chase reach out to you and have you send me one.
Okay. And then
I'd like a signed one.
Then Instagram, that's where I'm at mostly. And so you can find me at Jeff, the number 4 Esther. So Jeff Forrester. See what I did there? And then that's where I'll respond and
I got it.
Would love to connect with people.
Yeah, man. I really, like I said before, at the end of this interview, the thing I value most is people's time. That's the only thing we can't get back. And so I genuinely want to thank you for taking this, hour and 15 minutes to come on here and spread your message. I love what you're doing. Hopefully we can connect, maybe, get you on a hunt. You said you were picking up hunting, or what were you saying on that?
Yeah. So whole long story. So I also work with Outrider. So we do hunts across the world. So I help, I'm using my skills to help get that launched and off the ground. And then I also work with a group out of Argentina doing dove hunts. So we need to talk about getting a big group down there.
Yeah, I'd absolutely love that. We, like I said, we just took some people to Costa Rica surfing, so it's not just hunting. We're working on a Scotland golf trip. But anyway, just getting people
with the bulls in July.
Yeah, so awesome.
We got all kinds of crazy stuff.
I love it. So let's communicate and look at that, and then maybe we can get you out to Hawaii. That one's kind of the first one we do is like a invite only. But Seth's coming. Ryan, have you met Ryan?
Not personally, no. I know who he is.
Yeah.
And then I know Colin. I don't know if Colin coming with you this year.
He came 2 years ago, and then he hasn't come for a couple years. But yeah, I've done a couple hunts with Colin in Texas, and he actually invited me. I went out and hunted with him and my boy and my dad on his private place out in by San Antonio a couple years ago on a pig hunt. So and that's the thing. It's just going around meeting these people that are, trying to not even change lives, but that are living lives that you want to emulate and be closer to. So yeah, I appreciate you, Jeff. Thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to add at all before I close it down?
It was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for letting me chat.
Well, if you get out to Utah, man, look me up. Have you been out to Utah before?
I have not.
Well, I'll send you a link to some of my Airbnbs and check them out, and we'll see if we can get you out here.
That's awesome. Yeah, man.
All right, brother. I'm going to turn this off. All right. So there you have my conversation with Jeff. I love this job. I love being able to sit down with amazing people for an hour and a half and just ask them question after question to get to learn. You don't get many ways to do that. You go to lunch with your friends and stuff. There's a couple questions in there, but not just one after another where you can really dive into somebody's life and they'll open up and be honest with you. So very cool. I love what Jeff's doing, to go out there and try to help these student athletes that, it's such a pivotal time. I've got a child that's 13, huge into sports, and what a great time to get into their lives and help them in so many aspects when they've got so many things pulling them in so many different directions. So I love that he's found that, and that's his passion, and that's what he's pushing forward to. Thanks again for coming on, Jeff. Again, if you want to find Jeff, he's on Instagram, Jeff Forrester. That's JEF, the number 4 ESTER. And then his podcast, which is Pathways to Greatness podcast. And you can go check out his book, Unleash Potential. So lots of inspiring things in there. Appreciate your time, Jeff. That was a great conversation. Hope to meet you down the road. Again, M42 Adventures Podcast. Thank you for listening. Appreciate all the supporters, all the followers, everybody who has gotten our back so far in this first year of business. We are very appreciative. Thank you and have a great weekend.